So I guess in a way it all boils down to grandmas and queer visibility. Hey y'all, welcome back to my channel. My name is Evelyn and today we are going to be talking about books that made me happy cry. Now, I've said multiple times before on this channel that if a book succeeds in making me cry, I automatically like it a lot more than if it hadn't made me cry. Our brain uses tears as regulators for hormones. So when you feel an emotion so strongly that you cry, it means that you have felt the max capacity for that emotion that your brain can handle at one time, and it needed to just like release the floodgates and let it all out. Which means that if a book made me cry, it made me experience the max capacity of whatever emotion it was trying to get me to experience. That's good. That's the goal, and I have to appreciate that. So there are books that I really liked that made me cry, and that took it up to like a love. Now, there are lots and lots of books that have made me cry tears of sadness, but today I wanted to focus on the positive. I've had a real stressful past couple of weeks, so I thought, why not talk about books that just made me the happiest they could make me. So before we jump into it, I'd just like to remind you to click that subscribe button if you want to see more bookish content from me. Let's get started. So first we have Don't Date Rosa Santos by Nina Moreno. This follows Rosa Santos, who's the granddaughter of a Cuban immigrant, and according to local gossip, her family might be cursed. Every time one of the Santos women falls in love with a boy, something bad happens with him and the ocean, which means Rosa's grown up being told to avoid boys and the water. Two things that become a little bit difficult when the marina in her seaside hometown is threatened and the town decides to band together to throw a festival in order to raise the money to save it. And Rosa is paired up with this cute guy with a boat to help plan a wedding. So there are so many reasons that I love this book, but specifically it was one of the first books that I read that really spoke to my experience as a member of the Latinx diaspora. Rosa's family in the book, as I said, is Cuban. My family is Mexican. So culturally, there are similarities, but they're kind of worlds apart. It's the way in which Rosa relates to her culture that really rang true to me. Like Rosa, I am a couple generations removed from the people who brought the culture into America. We both find our strongest cultural ties through our grandmothers. Rosa is not super confident in her own personal connection with the culture and spends most of the book trying to find ways to forge that connection. She's decided that she wants to study abroad in Cuba and has shaped her entire view of her future around this one goal. Now, of course, there is nothing wrong inherently with wanting to visit your cultural homeland. I would love to go to the area in Mexico where my family is from one day. However, it's almost as if Rosa is overcompensating and making choices that if she had a better outlet for connecting with her culture wouldn't necessarily make, that are gonna shape her future in like really big ways. Basically, she's just looking for validation, somebody to tell her you are Cuban enough. The thing is, there's not really a metric for that sort of thing, and she's definitely not getting that from the people around her. There's a scene in the book where her grandmother finally does open up and offer some sort of validation to her, and every time I read that part of the book, I just burst into tears. It's so beautiful and beautifully written. The thing that makes this book stand out from some others on this list is that it also makes me cry sad tears. And just the dichotomy between this beautiful, wonderful, happy moment and then these very heart-wrenching, poignant, sad moments, and the way that they interact with each other just makes this book so beautiful and magical, and I cannot recommend it enough. Next, we have The Princess and the Fangirl by Ashley Poston. This is book number 2 in the Once Upon a Con series. This series as a whole is very much a comfort read for me, and there's probably at least one place in each book where I cry, and I definitely cried sad tears when I finished Bookish and the Beast because I was not ready for the series to be over. But book number 2 in particular has the most stuff in it that just makes me ridiculously incandescently happy. So the Once Upon a Con series are all contemporary fairy tale retellings that explore nerd culture. The Princess and the Fangirl in particular is a Prince and the Pauper retelling that focuses on a movie star and a fangirl. These two girls look remarkably similar, and they're actually able to trade places over a Comic-Con weekend in order to solve the mystery of a missing script. So there are 2 main things in this book that make me cry happy tears. The first is the way in which it addresses being female in fan spaces. This is something that is addressed across all 3 books, but this book in particular goes into it the most because it's able to show the issues from both a actress-artist perspective and a fan perspective. Throughout the series, the fictional television show slash movie slash novelization universe of Starfield is used to make commentary on similar real-life fandoms like Star Trek and Star Wars. And this book specifically released around the same time frame as when god-awful Star Wars bros were bullying Daisy Ridley and Kelly Marie Tran off of the internet. That was not a great time to be female in a fan space. It's a very interesting experience because lots of fan culture is created and maintained by women, but it's still perceived as a very masculine space, and the men within those spaces like to think of themselves as being somehow more marginalized just because their interests don't necessarily align with the zeitgeist, even though like fan culture has never been more popular culture. So being a woman in these spaces, you run up against just a ridiculous amount of toxic masculinity, and the worst of it is in situations like the Star Wars situation. Being in these spaces as a young girl is already hard enough, but at the time watching absolutely no one protect these women from hordes of so-called fans of the art that they were helping create, it was just horrifying. It felt completely demoralizing and like nobody was listening to us. So the fact that this book in a roundabout way addresses that issue was so amazing. So the character Jessica Stone is the female star of the Starfield movies. She plays Princess Amara, who's this legacy character. And there are a lot of fans who do not really like her, to the point where it has alienated her from the story and the universe itself, and she has publicly admitted that she does not want her character to come back in a sequel. Obviously, this has just made things worse for her, especially considering that there's this very large push from female fans in the Starfield fandom to unfringe her character. So for the entire story, we're exploring how these cultures can become toxic. And there is a moment in which both girls get to push back against that. Just directly push back against that. Take a stand and reclaim Princess Amara and say, you can't strip away our power. You're trying to, but we're not going to let you. It's just as if someone was finally looking at me and other girls like me who love these stories so deeply and so dearly. But if we want to share that love with the world, we risk getting hurt by the communities that claim to love the thing that we love, the communities that should embrace us. It's like somebody was looking at us and saying, no, it's okay, I see that. I've been there, and it's not okay. And it has to change, and it will change. Which was just, so amazing. Of course I cried. And then the second thing has to do with the fact that there are two point of view characters in the book who are not in a romantic entanglement with each other, as is the setup of the other two, which means that there are two romances in the book, and one of them is sapphic, which is already great, but it's the way in which the sapphic relationship is placed in the story that really got to me, because these books follow some standard rom-com romance tropes, and one of the huge conventions of these stories is the big grand romantic gesture at the end after there's been a miscommunication where the character's like, wait, no, I love you and I care about you and I'm sorry, take a chance on me. If you change your mind, I'm the first in line, honey, I'm still free, take a chance on me. This is one of the very first stories that I'd read in which that moment is given to the sapphic couple, as opposed to the straight couple that is right there and could have gotten it had the plot been just a little bit different. She chose to showcase the sapphic couple and give them that very iconic role within the story, and that was just so cool, and it happened kind of right after the other thing, and so more tears. Next we have Red, White, and Royal Blue by Casey McQuiston. If you watched my last video, you know that I am not always good at keeping up with super popular books, especially the queer ones, because I've had a history of reading some of the most popular queer books and just being like, about them. Specifically fantasy, I'm not as picky with contemporary, which is probably why I actually really enjoyed this book when I read it for the first time 2 weeks ago. It was fun and funny and lovely escapist entertainment, which we could all use right now. So this is set in an alternate contemporary universe in which Donald Trump never became president of the United States. Instead, we elected a woman, like smart people would have. So the story follows first son Alex, who has this kind of infamous one-sided rivalry with Henry, one of the princes of England, and this comes to a head when an incident between the two of them at the royal wedding ends in the destruction of a very expensive wedding cake. And in order to sort of fix things, not cause an international media crisis, the two of them are kind of forced to spend time together in public. And they realize that maybe they have a lot more in common than they thought, and that they should be friends, if not something more. Again, there were two big things about this book that ended in me crying. The first being just a ridiculously large-scale level of queer visibility and celebration. I don't want to spoil too much, but if you've read the book, you probably know what I'm talking about. And suffice it to say, I want one of those shirts now. The History Huh shirts, I'm one of those girls now. I can't afford it right now, but one day, because the scene of just like worldwide queer acceptance, so beautiful. The second thing being the election. So this book covers a fictional version of the 2020 election, which we've now all lived through, and that shit was stressful as hell. It's like the weirdest purgatory week of my life. So as I'm reading the book, I'm like flashing back to actual 2020 election, especially when it starts talking about like flipping red states to blue. I just went straight back to, oh my god, we flipped Georgia. That kind of elation. To be fair, when I say we, I definitely mean local organizers working on the ground in Georgia for literal years trying to combat voter suppression. I had nothing to do with flipping Georgia in the federal election. I did have a little tiny bit to do, a little baby bit, with flipping the Senate, because when the recall election was announced, I just went straight ahead and signed up to do phone banking for Ossoff's campaign, and ended up helping with Warnock's campaign through that as well. 10 out of 10 would recommend. I have phone call anxiety, like pretty bad phone call anxiety, and they made it super easy. The thing about that is I didn't get a chance to celebrate when they won those elections, because it happened overnight, and then when I woke up in the morning, idiots were storming the Capitol, and that kind of took precedence over any celebration. And so I think as I'm reading this election scene, I finally got the chance to be like, holy shit, we did something. Maybe it wasn't like staggeringly huge change in the grand scheme of things, but it was a push in the right direction, and a pretty big push. And yeah, this book helped me be able to reflect on that and think, wow, we're a little bit closer to this lovely fictional reality than we were when this book was published, which was really cool. Next we have Field Notes on Love by Jennifer E. Smith. So Hugo's not having the greatest time of it. He has no idea really what he wants to do with his future. He just knows he's not super psyched about the idea of going to university in the same town that he's always lived in with his 5 siblings. To top that all off, his girlfriend just broke up with him. On the bright side though, she did leave him the tickets for the cross-country train trip across America they were planning on going on together. Except they're in her name and they are both non-refundable and non-transferable. Which means if he wants to have one last adventure before getting locked into his future, he's gonna have to find another Margaret Campbell. Enter May, who's also kind of having a rough go of it right now. She did not get into her dream film school because apparently the film that she submitted was impersonal. When she gets the opportunity to go on a cross-country train trip with a stranger, she hesitates, but after a little bit of encouragement from her grandmother, she decides to take the leap and have the adventure. The two of them start as strangers, but as they bond over May's new documentary project, they realize they might be the only people who really understand each other right now. As someone very interested in the art of video production, I loved the fact that a lot of this plot focuses on this documentary that May is creating and that Hugo ends up helping her with. As a plot device, it's the thing that helps the two of them bond, and that's all I really expected it to be. But then we actually get to see a little bit of the documentary. Somehow, Jennifer E. Smith manages to tie together May finally opening up, her relationship with her grandmother, and this like love connection that the two of them have together in just the most beautiful way, and instant tears just every time I read it. I just need this to be adapted so that I can see it, like actually see it as an actual video, because I think that would destroy me, but in the best way possible. Next we have You Should See Me in a Crown by Leah Johnson. Liz Leidy is one of only a few black students at her very affluent suburban high school, and she learned a long time ago that life is just easier for her if she stays a wallflower. She is just waiting for the day when she is able to go to her dream school, study hematology, and become a doctor to help sickle cell patients like her mother and her brother. But in order to do that, she was relying on getting a music scholarship. When that falls through, she has to get a little bit creative with how she's going to get the funds by signing up to run for prom queen, because at her school, prom is such a big deal that it comes with a scholarship for the winners. The thing is, Liz isn't exactly what you'd call a traditional prom queen candidate. She's shy, she's not white, and she might be falling for the competition. Now obviously I cannot relate to the very specific experience of being black and being surrounded by white kids and trying to go through high school like that. High school's awful. Everyone feels like they are a misfit in high school to a certain degree. That is why there are so many coming-of-age movies with a similar basic plot, right? Some unpopular kid decides that they're going to try to be popular for whatever reason, and they change themselves a bunch to get there, and then happily ever after, yay, they get the boy or the girl or whatever. I know that this book is inspired by some of those classic stories, specifically like movies from the 80s. However, the thing that I really love about it is that it remixes that already familiar story into something way more empowering. Because initially Liz is trying to make herself fit into the ideal image of what she believes is an electable prom queen. It isn't until she stops aiming toward that white cis heteronormative ideal and just embraces herself and shows everyone how amazing she is that she begins to thrive. And I think that version of this message is just so much more powerful than any take on it I've ever seen before. And then of course one must factor in the queer visibility aspect, which at that point in the story is when I actually started crying. But it ties in so well with, you know, Liz becoming her true and honest self. Involves Liz being with the girl that she likes at prom. Next we have Miss Meteor by Anna-Marie McLemore and Taylor Kimihia. This book follows two former best friends who have grown apart over the years because of secrets that they've been keeping from each other. One of them is struggling to come to grips with her own pansexuality. The other is literally made of star stuff, and she's kind of falling apart. The two of them end up coming back into each other's lives and trying to work together so that one of them can win their town's very prestigious Miss Meteor pageant. The thing is, no one who looks like them has ever won. It's never been a brown girl, even though they live in the middle of New Mexico. So the thing that I really love about this story is the way that it discusses and portrays different friendships. But there's also just this very wonderful, like, found family group of characters that come together because of the whole beauty pageant thing. And of course the scene that just absolutely destroyed me emotionally, another queer visibility scene, after what very well could have been just an awful, awful moment for Cheeky, the pansexual character in the book, if she'd had to face it alone, she is just surrounded by friendship and love in a way that I just couldn't handle. It's so good. I love them so much. If you're like me and you are a gay who's in love with the found family trope, then you will absolutely love this book. It's one of my favorite friendship groups in any book that I've ever read, and I don't hear a lot of people talking about it, and that is very sad because I just want to be I just want to be in that group of friends. I just love them so much. Next we have You Have a Match by Emma Lord. When Abby decided to take a DNA test in solidarity with one of her best friends, she wasn't expecting the results to come back with a secret sister. Perfectly polished Instagram star Savannah is only a year older than Abby. They live about an hour away from each other and they share both biological parents. So why have the girls never even heard about each other? Sensing some sort of taboo family mystery, the two girls decide to meet up at a summer camp in order to get to the bottom of things without their parents knowing. So I talk a lot on this channel about being Latinx diaspora. I talked about it earlier in this video, but I don't really talk a lot about why it was so important for me to reconnect with that side of my family. And that is because the other side of my family, genetically speaking, was a real big question mark. You see, my father is adopted. And don't get me wrong, I absolutely adore my paternal grandparents, but I don't necessarily look like them, and I definitely don't look like my super Mexican grandmother. I only look like my parents, and growing up that was a little bit weird once I kind of became aware of it. And for a while I even hated the fact that I wanted to know more about where that side of my family came from. It was like I was fitting into this stereotype about adopted kids and I wasn't even an adopted kid to begin with. The thing about adoption is most of the stories we get are either like super sappy white savior movies or like the most intense shit, right? It's adopted kids who feel like something's missing in their lives, like they've got a giant hole in their soul where their bio parents should be. Bio parents who are addicted to drugs or who fucking murdered somebody. I don't know. It's all very dramatic and very much not at all like my family's story. And so when I first heard about this book and I first saw the cover, I was looking at it and I realized, oh my gosh, this is probably not going to be a tragic story. And that's why I wanted to read it. I was very lucky enough to get an arc of this book, and I was reading it last fall, actually at a time in which, for reasons I shall not disclose because it is not my story to tell, I really needed an adoption story with a happy ending. Abby and Savannah's experience with adoption is definitely not an easy one. Abby is left feeling as if Savannah might have been the better daughter, and there are lots of messy emotions for them to work through together, but ultimately there is everything to gain from what happened. And last but certainly not least, we have Perfect on Paper by Sophie Gonzalez. This one just released last week, and oh my god, instant favorite. I love this book so much. It follows Darcy, who's been running an anonymous relationship advice business out of a locker in her high school. No one knows it's her until she gets caught by one of her classmates. And he kind of possibly blackmails her into becoming his personal relationship coach and helping him win back his ex-girlfriend. There are so many things to love about this book. There's actually legitimately good relationship advice, friends to lovers dynamic that's super shippable, High School Musical discourse, flirting at Disneyland. Oh, yes, so perfect. Oh, I'm wearing a Disney World shirt. For a second I was like, wait, am I wearing the perfect shirt? No. This is Magic Kingdom. And just an absolute rainbow of queer characters, including our main character, Darcy, who is bisexual. So the book is not specifically about queer issues, although it does address several, which is why I think it is so cool that there are so many queer characters out on the page, because a lot of times, unless books are directly addressing queer issues, and that is the main point of the book, you don't actually see more than gay best friend. I'm saying all this about it not being about queer issues, but it is the way in which the story addresses specifically biphobia and internalized biphobia. That is what made me cry. So Darcy is a bisexual character who's had crushes on girls but has never actually been in a romantic relationship with girls. And she struggles with the good old bisexual classic, am I queer enough if I'm not in a visibly queer relationship? And she gets an opportunity in the book to voice those fears and concerns to the other queer characters in the book. And that scene is just so beautiful. It's so wonderful. It made me feel seen as fuck. I've read several stories at this point with bisexual main characters, but still a lot of them are either side characters or their story is about realizing that they are bisexual. Darcy's dealing with an issue that mostly only ever comes up after you've come out. It's the expectations of the people around you of how visibly queer you should be in order to participate within the community. It's stressful and exhausting, and to have an author acknowledge it in such a big way. I cried. Of course I cried. Because I felt understood. There you have it. Those are books that have made me cry happy tears. Let me know in the comments down below, what are some of your go-to happy books? Also, do you want to see a video about books that have made me cry sad tears? There are significantly more of those, and a lot of them are fantasy. I could not think of a single completely fantasy book that I'd read that made me cry happy tears. The closest thing on this list is Miss Meteor, and that's more magical realism. So, fantasy authors are mean, apparently? Would you like me to drag them publicly? I could do it. If you like this video and you want to see more from my channel, remember to click that subscribe button. With that being said, my name is Evelyn. I make new videos every magical Monday, and I'll see you real soon. Bye.